If you've had shoulder pain, you need this trick. Hi, and welcome everybody. It's Jason Barlow, RMT, and I'm here today as your therapist and as your coach to help you transform any stress, tension, and pain into health, happiness, and vitality. So do you struggle with any kind of shoulder immobility, pain, restriction, stress, or tension? It's a common injury that I see, and especially when I was working quite extensively with a lot of CrossFit athletes, it was probably the number one injury I would see in the CrossFit athletes. Because why? The range of motion that you need for some of the movement patterns within CrossFit especially are dependent upon your flexibility within your shoulder. Now, I say flexibility also places a great demand upon the stability, the postural control, and the overall alignment of the shoulder. Now, we're going to explore a little bit on that, and I might touch upon this a bit more in a week's time as well, because there's a lot to this. Nitty gritty is this. What I'm sharing with you today is a particular stretch. That's the trick. Now, you can get access to the stretch straight away if you wish. Go down to the description below, and you don't even have to listen to me talk. You just have to go straight to that description, capture that YouTube clip, launch it, go do it. Perfect. Now, if you want more information on it, why am I teaching that stretch? Stick around. Also, below in the description is my blog link. You can read more extensively on the details behind what I'm sharing with you today through my blog, which is connected to my website. The link is below. Copy, paste that, and away you go. All right. So for those of you sticking around, thank you. And let's plunge into how this is actually going to serve a benefit to you. So a common thing that I see as a therapist is arm numbness and tingling. And that very often can be coming from somewhere in here in the wrist and forearm. It could be coming from somewhere in the anterior shoulder, posterior shoulder, into the neck or into the actual vertebrae. The spaces between those bones might be collapsing, or there might be a misalignment, which is compressing the nerves. Very often, I would say from my experience, the classic one is here in the clavicle, shoulder, neck region. There is a plexus, which basically means the dense network of nerves that are coming from the brain through the spinal cord and out as nerve roots from the cervical spine, which is your neck, essentially. They then also create another dense network of this cool, intricate webbing that is called the brachial plexus. And this area often is getting compressed and impinged upon mainly the scalene muscles, which I've talked about in the past. You can go back and look for that one, but also then the anterior shoulder. Because you think about how much time throughout your day are you spending in a forward rounded position? Very often our head's looking forward. We're not looking behind us typically in our work day. It's just inefficient. We wouldn't be able to do it for very long. We're very efficient at looking forward and looking down. In fact, that's what we're taught from a young age. You know, when we get to school, it's rounded posture, sat at the desk. And we adopt that posture early on, and it becomes fairly comfortable for us to adopt, so that becomes a norm almost throughout our life. Now, remember, if you've been reading some of my book already, the 15-step playbook for pain relief, ultimately it is what when it comes to posture? It is the dose that makes the poison. So it's not the sitting necessarily itself, it's how long you are sitting for that becomes the problem. So if you're sat for several hours a day, but you don't take any time at the end of your day to lengthen those muscles, stretch and elongate, or do the opposite movement patterns, you're going to build up what I call postural debt, which is that forward rounded posture, head dropping forward head posture. All that starts to do is accumulate so much tension and adhesion around all the musculoskeletal frame of the anterior part of your shoulder, the front of your shoulder. That then has a greater likelihood of compressing, because it's altering the position and the mechanics of the joints that the muscles are attaching to. So it's naturally going to create more compression of nerve roots that are coming from the neck through the arm, shoulder, down to control the wrist and finger. It would be analogous to, you watering your garden and one of your friends or your partner or your kids is standing on the hose. The water is spraying out nicely for a moment or two. Then they were just teasing you and they put their foot on the hose. Temporarily, it's going to reduce the flow, reduce the pressure, and the water's not going to spray as far. It's the same when it comes to you having the same issue with your nerves, is if you have compression of the muscles on those nerves, it's very similar to that pressure of your foot on a hose, which as a result is going to reduce the flow and therefore the flow of information that's going down into the neck, arm, and shoulder, which these nerve roots control. Now, I'm specifically saying neck, but that applies to the middle back, to the lower back. Wherever there's roots of the nerves coming from the spinal cord, you could have these types of compressions. Today, I'm specifically focusing in on Thoracic Outlet Syndrome, which is a classic condition up here. It can also give rise to not just the numbness and tingling in the hand and fingers, it can also give rise to cold fingers. So if you find that you do get cold fingers, if you get numbness and tingling, or an array of those types of symptoms, numbness and pain higher up, or just general pain in the arm and shoulder, this would be definitely something you want to have further evaluated and ultimately treated. So how do we treat it? There's a few steps to take. Today, though, I'm just going to center in on one of them, and that is how to stretch effectively. I've talked about in the past how to stretch the scaling muscles. That's number one. Number two now is looking at specifically pectoral major and minor. So the pectoral major is a fairly large muscle that covers pretty much the upper breast, male, female, and it's going to be attaching into the front of the shoulder. So when it gets shortened and tightened, it will produce a forward rounded posture. The humerus, which is the long bone of the upper arm, is where this muscle is attaching to. So if you imagine just bringing any 2 points closer together, it will alter the alignment of that humerus sitting in the shoulder girdle itself. And that's what I was finding with those CrossFit athletes, is very often they were going into this high intensity, high range of motion type of activity that was very demanding, but they hadn't yet, let's say, regained, because they'd had it, but now they were, late 20s to mid 40s range, and they hadn't been working on their mobility in the shoulder, and now suddenly they are requiring both mobility and strength and stability in that rather extreme range of motion. Now, I say extreme, I mean, the body's designed to go to that extreme, but not necessarily, if you're not used to it, going with a high weight, which is what a lot of the CrossFit athletes are doing, swinging from the bar to produce a violent force, if you will, of getting back up for a chin-up. So there's a lot of movements within CrossFit that demand a great range of motion in the spine, in the shoulders, in the hips. If you don't have that and you go do a movement pattern such as those involved in CrossFit, or even going out and playing, baseball, and you're throwing the ball fast and vigorously, and you haven't done that for a period of time, there's a high chance or a higher chance of sustaining an injury to the shoulder. Why? Because you haven't yet developed or redeveloped those motor abilities and ranges of motion. So this stretch I'm teaching you today is going to help build that foundation. The key thing with it is getting lots of repetitions. Just doing it once a day is not quite going to cut it. You've got to do it several times a day, and you've got to make sure that you're getting the right type of intensity. It's like going to the gym and lifting a 2-pound weight. It's probably not going to do too much if you're already fairly strong and you're fairly active. You're probably going to want more, a 10 to 20-pound weight, or maybe even more. It's the same approach when it comes to stretching. We've got to have the right volume, how often you're doing it, and intensity, how much of a stretch you feel when you're doing it. So 10 would be rather extreme, right? Degree of stretch I would shoot for is anywhere between 7, maybe even upwards of 9, but 7 to 9 range. So if you're not getting a 7 to 9 range, 10 be a maximum in terms of degree of stretch, intensity of the stretch, then you definitely need to evaluate the stretch you're doing, the position you're in, maybe even, technically how you're actually executing it. That's the purpose of my video below. It shows you how to do it, how to position yourself. But there's lots of variations to this one stretch. So you can experiment, alter the position a little bit, use the door jam if you wish. There's a standing variation. What I'm sharing with you is the one that I find most effective personally and professionally. You take it and use it and see if it works for you. Thank you for joining me. I hope you found that a benefit. I would like to extend on this topic maybe a bit more next week. We'll see what we get up to. But remember, your muscle health is my #1 priority. Go get my free digital book while you still can. It's jasonbarlowrmt.com. Just leave me your email. I'll fire off you a digital copy. Very shortly, that's going to be pulled away. We're just going to offer a free chapter here and there. And there's going to be a program that's involved in getting hold of that book if you want the complete book. So thank you. I bid you a good night, and we'll see you guys on Thursday.